Good evening, I'm Robbie Alampay. The big stories tonight. In his first speech before the United Nations, President Duterte asserts the Philippine victory in the 2016 Hague ruling and says there will be no compromises there. A team of global experts, however, has tagged the president as a medical populist, leading the country's failure to suppress the pandemic. Their study places the Philippines at the bottom half among 91 countries. Facebook has shut down more than 150 accounts from China and the Philippines for violating its policies. One Block local network says the social media giant has links to the police. And if you want some genuine white sand under your feet, well, maybe as early as next month, Boracay is reopening in October. And another Filipina is making her mark in Hollywood as she voices the lead character in the upcoming Netflix animated film, Over the Moon. We begin tonight with President Duterte, who for the first time delivered a speech at the 75th General Assembly of the United Nations. He asserted the 2016 arbitral ruling awarded to the Philippines, which invalidated China's 9-line claim over the South China Sea. President Duterte also addressed critics over the country's controversial anti-drugs campaign. Maricel Halili has the big story.
In his first appearance before the United Nations General Assembly, President Duterte invoked the Philippines' arbitral win against China. The chief executive emphasized the country's commitment is in accordance with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. The president also welcomed the increasing number of states that have come in support of the arbitral ruling.
The award is now part of international law, beyond compromise and beyond the reach of passing governments to dilute, diminish, or abandon. We firmly reject attempts to undermine it.
China, however, has never acknowledged the arbitral ruling since it was awarded to the Philippines 4 years ago. In his State of the Nation address last July, Duterte even called himself inutile in asserting the rights over the West Philippine Sea. Despite this, his spokesman Harry Roque insisted that Duterte has always been consistent in his statements.
Ngayon lang po yan narinig galing sa bibig ng presidente sa UN dahil ngayon lang naman nagsalita ang presidente galing sa UN, pero wala pong bago dyan. No? Yan po yung consistent position na ng presidente.
The president also took the opportunity to defend the country's war against illegal drugs. Duterte slammed those he called detractors who passed themselves off as human rights advocates while using children as shields in encounters. He maintained that while open dialogue may end the issue, there must also be full respect of the principles of objectivity and non-interference.
A number of interest groups have weaponized human rights, some well-meaning, others ill-intentioned. They attempt to discredit the functioning institutions and mechanisms of democratic country.
The chief executive also defended the passage of the anti-terror law, which is now facing a number of petitions before the Supreme Court. As for the ongoing health crisis, Duterte asked assurance for the universal access to anti-COVID technologies and products, including vaccines.
When the world finds that vaccine, access to it must not be denied nor withheld. It should be made available to all rich and poor nations alike as a matter of policy.
The president noted that the Philippines joins other ASEAN countries in their stand that COVID-19 vaccine must be considered a global public good. For News 5, Maricel Halili, we are One News.
Former Foreign Affairs Secretary Albert Del Rosario lauded the president's uncompromising stance on the Hague ruling. In a recorded address, Del Rosario commended the president for supporting the rising number of states that have publicly thrown their weight behind the award. Del Rosario, who together with former Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales made the charge against China before the International Criminal Court, now challenges the president to urge more countries to acknowledge the ruling.
And we are heartened to know that he is not at all impervious, but listens to the will of his countrymen. It is our hope that this puts to rest the misconception that bringing the arbitral award to the UNGA is relitigating the case. All Filipinos should now unite so that the world will help our country and enforce the arbitral award against China. Let us not allow this opportunity to be put to waste.
Their council now hopes that this becomes an across-the-board policy, including the protection of our exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea, as well as negotiations for the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea. Senator Panfilo Lacson hopes the president's language has erased doubts about his stance regarding the matter. He also expressed hope that China heard the president's message loud and clear. The National Task Force Against COVID-19 was alarmed that a majority of active cases in Batangas are only under home quarantine. Meanwhile, an international medical journal ranks the Philippines 66th in terms of virus suppression. The reason for the low ranking in this report by J.C. Cosico.
Officials from the National Task Force Against COVID-19 and the Code Team visited Batangas to aid the province in its COVID-19 response. They were alarmed after finding out that of the 6,000 confirmed infections in the province, majority of the over 2,600 active cases are under home quarantine.
Once na hindi nyo tinanggal yan sa bahay, hahawahan niya yung kanyang mga anak, hahawahan niya yung mga kapatid, hahawahan niya yung lahat ng kaibigan sa community, hahawahan niya yung tindera, hahawahan niya lahat yung mga pinupuntahan niya.
Here's the problem. The province has only 26 isolation sites with a 500-bed capacity. Its health office admitted they are having difficulties in identifying quarantine sites.
Although sa ibang LGUs po kasi, meron sila na-identify. Ang problema kasi ngayon, sino yung magmaman doon sa facility?
The national government vowed to help Batangas with this problem.
Dito po sa probinsya ng Batangas ay may inihahanda po kaming 600 beds immediately, na kwarto para po maihiwalay ito. Meron tayong mga hotels na po na na-identify. Meron pong dalawa na nasa 300 beds po yon na ready for occupancy na yon.
In a separate press briefing, the NTF slammed the Vice President Leni Robredo's comment that COVID-19 can be suppressed even without a vaccine.
Bago po sana po kayo mag-comment, tingnan niyo po yung nangyayari sa baba. Ang lahat po ng ating mga LGUs na papakihirap at saka ang ating mga natawag natin mga health workers na papakihirap para masugpo po ang COVID-19. Marami po tayong deficiencies.
In a Facebook post, Robredo shared the study of international medical journal The Lancet, which stated that 19 countries, including Taiwan, Thailand, and Cuba, have suppressed the virus. This, says Robredo, is something the Philippines can replicate. The same study also ranked the country 66 out of 91 countries in terms of virus suppression. Lancet also attributed the country's rank to President Rodrigo Duterte's so-called medical populism. The health department brushed this off and said they will just continue working.
We always receive naman itong mga ganitong mga komento, no? There are rankings and then there are this specific comments. But ang sa amin, magtatrabaho lang kami ng tuloy-tuloy. Kami po ay sama-samang nagtatrabaho.
Care utilization rate in NCR, Calabarzon, and Cebu have improved, including that of case and mortality doubling time. But Vergere says this does not mean that Metro Manila may be downgraded to a more relaxed quarantine status, as there are still clustering of cases. Meanwhile, the NTF is already preparing for the possible shift of Metro Manila to MGCQ.
Ibig sabihin, dapat we will prepare our capacities and also we will prepare our quarantine facilities and also prepare po natin ang ating tinatawag nating minimum health standard to be fully implemented to the fullest.
For News 5, J.C. Cosico, we are One News.
Some 50,000 contact tracers could be up for deployment next month. Interior Secretary Eduardo Año says That could happen by October 1st once the program's budget has been released. 5 billion pesos will be allotted for the additional contact tracers under Bayanihan 2. Based on DILG guidelines, hired contact tracers will receive minimum wage of more than 18,000 pesos monthly for their services.
Talaga ito ay hulog nation approach. Tapos meron din tayong yung local government academy natin na tutulong din sa pagtandak ng training. Meron din tayong mga mobile training teams na umiikot. Pinangungunahan pa nga yan ni Mayor Benji Magalo.
An already strong appetite for health supplements has been fortified some more during the pandemic. That's according to a report from the Philippine Star. Back in 2018, the DOH data showed that the multivitamin segment had grown to become a 15 billion peso industry. In that same year, health supplements made up 27% of sales of over-the-counter drugs. Market research firm Euromonitor International expects the pharmaceutical market to grow more than double to around 33.6 billion pesos this year. Bayer, the manufacturer of Boracay, told the Philippine Star they see a 24% growth globally in the nutritionals or supplements category during the first half of the year. Unilab also saw demand rise, but that was tempered by shortages in raw and packaging materials due to quarantine measures. Former IATF advisor Anthony Leachon warns, however, that vitamins are not meant to treat COVID-19. Let's pause for a short break. But when the big story returns, medical personnel in private hospitals, listen up, you might just get a raise. The Labor Department is proposing a wage increase. And Facebook has purged some 150 accounts from China and the Philippines, some of which they say are linked to the national police. The details next. You're watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano gathered the House majority today to iron out priority bills of the lower chamber, but there was no mention of the term-sharing agreement between him and Congressman Lord Alan Velasco. Marian Enriquez tells us why.
Lahat ng representatives na meron concern, kahit isang constituent lang nila, they can talk to us. But there will be no blackmailing, there will be no hostage taking, there will be no moves that will force us na pumayag ng pork, parking, or corruption.
In his address before the House majority on Wednesday afternoon, House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano urged all lawmakers who have concerns to speak out or approach him or House Majority Leader Martin Romualdez. Amid the speakership row hounding the lower chamber of Congress, Cayetano thanked his colleagues for their overwhelming support and enjoined them to translate this in delivering the best national budget for all.
That budget should be able to address yung kabuhayan at buhay. Diba? Lives and livelihood. So baliwala ang support if we stay in office pero we don't deliver yung priorities ng administration at pangangailangan ng tao.
However, there was no mention of the supposed change in House leadership by next month. Meanwhile, during this afternoon's House session, several lawmakers have also expressed support for Cayetano through their privileged speech and manifestations. On Tuesday, House Deputy Speaker El Rey Villafuerte claimed that over 200 House members want Cayetano to continue the speakership. This despite the term-sharing deal between Cayetano and Marinduque Representative Lord Alan Velasco, brokered by no less than President Duterte. Under the agreement, Cayetano will serve as House Speaker for 15 months and will be replaced by Velasco come late October. Villafuerte and Congressman Fred Danil Castro also claimed that Velasco has not been vocal nor active in any of the major issues looming over the lower chamber. In a Facebook post today, Velasco stressed that his silence does not mean disinterested. He added that he would rather work quietly and work and away from publicity. Velasco then assured that when both parties finally honor the agreement, he will show his colleagues his kind of leadership. For News 5, Marian Enriquez. We are One News.
Facebook has taken down 2 networks of accounts, pages, and groups originating from China and the Philippines for violating the platform's policies. The social media giant removed 155 accounts, 11 pages, 9 groups, and 6 Instagram accounts. According to Facebook, head of security policy Nathaniel Bleischer, the pages exhibited coordinated inauthentic behavior on behalf of a foreign or government entity. The Chinese network mostly posts about supporting President Duterte and Sara Duterte's potential 2022 presidential bid and criticizing online site Rappler, among others. As for the Philippines, the pages were found to have had links to the military and the police. These accounts mostly posted about the Communist Party of the Philippines, youth activists, and the opposition. The Philippine National Police has disowned these pages. And these are the other big stories today. The Metropolitan Water Works and Sewerage System is expecting some delays in the Kaliwa Dam project due to the pandemic. The MWSS has yet to secure the environmental compliance certificate and the consent of indigenous peoples. So concessionaires like Maynilad are tapping other sources. Maynilad will install a modular treatment plant from Israel to treat water from the rivers of Imus Cavite. They're also looking to start producing 26 million liters of water per day by the end of the year. The government of Qatar has abolished the kafala system for migrant workers. The kafala system requires migrant workers to get permission from their employers should they decide to change jobs. Labor Secretary Silvestre Bello said this would give OFWs in Qatar the flexibility to seek better work opportunities. The Department of Labor is also set to present the proposed bill for salary increases of healthcare workers in private hospitals to the Interagency Task Force tomorrow. According to Bello, medical staff from the private sector should receive equal pay as those from public hospitals. The Labor Secretary hopes this will compel healthcare workers to continue their service in the country. The Finance Department is urging Filipinos to spend to keep the economy rolling, but senators are asking how is that supposed to happen when assistance to the poor has been withheld. Meanos Baños with the story.
As the economy hits a snag due to the pandemic, the Finance Department deemed it's best to spend to stimulate the economy rather than hold on to cash. In Wednesday's hearing of the Finance Department's 2021 budget, DOF Secretary Carlos Dominguez reported that tax revenue so far this year is lower by 24% compared to the original 2020 target, which is pegged at 3.4 trillion pesos. The decrease in collections prompted the DOF to revise and lower their targets for the year.
We will continue our budget spending as a part of stimulating the economy and use our good credit rating to fund that essentially that stimulus. We cannot save our way to prosperity. We have to spend our way to prosperity.
But more than the purchasing, the issue, says Dominguez, lies with the public's lack of confidence to go out and spend. The agency says this is already a psychological issue.
This COVID crisis hit both sides. It dropped people's incomes and they cannot spend. It also reduced the supplies. Like for instance, in transportation, with the necessity for social distancing. You have less supply of transportation. With more social distancing, you have less seats in restaurants, etc. So this is really a very, very difficult problem.
Senate Minority Leader Franklin Drilon shares Dominguez's sentiment that confidence is key, and he thinks the health department hasn't done much yet to address this.
When we compare ourselves to our neighboring countries, particularly Vietnam and Taiwan, we know that they have arrested the pandemic more, and this has contributed to the difficulty in attaining that confidence that you have pointed out, Mr. Secretary.
He also said that purchasing power was hampered when the Social Welfare Department withheld the release of 10 billion pesos worth of cash assistance to poor households. DSWD Secretary Rolando Bautista said they just followed a letter from the Office of the President in May, directing the agency to slash the number of recipients from 18 million to 14 million for the second phase of the Social Amelioration Program. The DSWD has so far released 200 billion pesos for the SAP, but several senators question the DSWD's move.
If this practice will go on of not spending the amount released, not appropriated, released to the agency, I'm afraid that your policy of budget spending will not bear the fruit.
Thank you for that. I was quite surprised myself, Your Honor, and we'll certainly take it up with the Budget Secretary and the DBCC.
The DOF is asking for an 18.28 billion peso budget for next year, with the Bureau of Internal Revenue getting the biggest share among its attached agencies. The Senate Committee on Finance has already approved the budget and endorsed it to be discussed to the plenary level. Reporting for News 5, Mean Los Baños, we are One News.
Time for a quick break, but when the big story returns, after beefing up the island's health protocols, Boracay is ready to open its shores to visitors starting next month. And we take a look at the new Netflix animated film that features the voice of this new Filipino talent. Quick peek after the break. You're watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. Did you miss going to the beach? A real one? Well, better make sure to undergo swab testing. You'll need that to get to Boracay once it opens next month. All you need to know about the island's reopening in this report by Shaila Francisco.
Starting October 1, tourists coming from areas under general community quarantine will be allowed to enter Boracay. Visitors will be required to present a negative swab test result taken 48 to 72 hours before their flight. They are also advised to undergo quarantine prior to their trips. There will be no age restrictions. The Boracay Interagency Task Force assures the public that strict health protocols are in place.
This is first to restart tourism. Number 2, para magkaroon na ng trabaho yung mga tao. And third, para naman finally makapunta na sa Boracay. We've proven that the protocols of Boracay are already in place. Very important is test before travel.
Only tourists from Western Visayas have been allowed to visit Boracay since June 16. The popular summer destination has only seen a total of 3,782 tourists since then, a far cry from the 5,000 visitors it used to receive per day. Local authorities made use of the past 3 months to beef up safety protocols in the island. For one, airlines are instructed to use only the Caticlan Airport for tourists in the island. It will also implement a QR code systems in hotel and other establishments as part of its contact tracing efforts. Employees from Western Visayas will be prioritized to return to work for now. The province has put up its own COVID testing laboratory. The tourism department, however, is eyeing to install another one in the island to cater to Boracay visitors. Parties and drinking sessions will be prohibited for now to ensure compliance to physical distancing and curfew.
Basta open air, limited activities actually basically pag open air, all the health and safety protocols are already there. Well, as of now, meron naman carrying capacity ang Boracay, but syempre 50% kasi kailangan may physical distancing.
Establishments have committed to provide 50 to 75% discounts to help offset the tourists' expenses for the RT-PCR test.
Yeah, everybody signified to give discount. Our governor asked that we should give promos. So yeah, we gave the discount so that to encourage tourists to come to Boracay. We know that there will be testing. 2 months ago pa lang talagang yun ang magiging protocol. So to even out the cost of that RT-PCR, yung discount talaga yung mag-aano sa kanila, mag-level out.
The Compliant Association of Boracay is hoping to triple the number of guests entering the island come October to help them recover losses from the past months. Shaila Francisco, VR1 News.
The Foreign Affairs Department is ramping up efforts to repatriate more seafarers stranded at sea in China as the COVID-19 pandemic prompted the country to close its borders to foreigners. Will they get home before Christmas? Gerard de la Peña tells us more.
It was a huge sigh of relief for these 11 Filipino seafarers when their vessel was finally allowed to approach the coast of Dongshan, China on Tuesday. The group is hoping to be finally sent home next week. They have been stranded at Ocean Star 86 for more than a year after their contracts expired sometime in 2018. It was all the more difficult for them to go home to the Philippines when China locked its borders to foreigners due to the pandemic.
Sana po makauwi na po kami, sana matulungan po kami ng Philippine Consulate dito po sa China po na makauwi kami po.
They are just among the 80,000 Filipino seafarers who have been stranded in the sea as the COVID-19 pandemic prompted various countries to close their borders.
Yung po yung problema, no? Hindi po sila makadaong at hindi po mababa yung ating mga seafarers kasi nga po bawal pa po sa buong China, no? Ang foreigners.
According to international maritime standards, a seafarer may only stay on board for a maximum of 11 months. Anything beyond this may result in anxiousness and depression.
Alam naman natin kung sobra na sa kontrata, it affects already their physical and mental health. So kung apektado yung physical and mental health ng mga seafarers natin, ibig sabihin unsafe na yung ang paglalayag ng mga barko natin.
The Foreign Affairs Department is offering psychosocial help to Filipinos overseas through embassies and consulates, but it admits extending the assistance is difficult.
Wala tayong social welfare attaché sa loob ng barko. Wala tayong polo OWA sa loob ng barko. Wala tayong embassy at consulate sa loob ng barko.
The DFA says it is already making arrangements with the Chinese embassy to repatriate more than 100 Filipinos in China. The department is also racing against time to repatriate as many Filipino seafarers worldwide as they can before Christmas. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, VR1 News.
Let's have a quick rundown on vaccine developments for COVID-19 across the globe. China's state-backed vaccine maker is hopeful that 2 of its COVID-19 vaccine candidates will receive conditional regulatory approval for general public use within the year. In China, authorities can grant conditional approval for vaccines while it is still under clinical trials if deemed urgent for major public health emergencies. Russia, meanwhile, announced it is willing to shoulder some of the legal liability should there be compensation claims due to any unexpected side effects from their potential vaccine. It's a different story over in Europe as vaccine makers will be indemnified if their COVID-19 shots cause unexpected side effects. To date, the European Commission has confidential liability clauses in contracts signed with AstraZeneca and Sanofi. And in entertainment, a Chinese-Filipino actress is marking her spot in Hollywood as she stars in an upcoming animated Netflix film. Cathy Ang takes the lead role in Glenn Keane's new animated movie, Over the Moon. She voices the role of Fei Fei, a young girl who builds a rocket ship to the moon to prove the existence of the legendary moon goddess. Over the Moon, a retelling of an ancient Chinese myth, also features voice performances of other Asian actors in Hollywood like John Cho, Margaret Cho, and Sandra Oh. It starts streaming on Netflix on October 23.
I'm gonna be there soon in my rocket to the moon.
For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay. We are One News. Good evening.